Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the seventh episode of the Not a Classroom podcast. My name is Kevin Foster, and today I'm meeting with my friend Noah. Noah is a writer, and he is currently working in the podcast industry, and we explore some topics about why we write and discipline and motivation in writing, eliminating barriers to creativity, and some stuff about having too many competing interests and not enough time, as well as tackling self-doubt and sort of questioning if your work is going to be any good or, I suppose, worth reading. But again, I'd like to start us off with a quick quote today, and this one is something that I read on the Camino de Santiago in Spain when I was hiking there. So here goes. The boat is safer anchored at the port, but that's not the aim of boats. Yeah, I think this quote is pretty relevant to the stuff we talk about in today's episode because, sometimes it sort of feels like I'm holding myself back in port in different ways, and whether that be through doubts or not giving myself the time to succeed in different endeavors that I want to, but it's really hard to tell. So I think it's important for everyone to be patient with themselves, but keep trying to do things. And yeah, hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you. All right, so Noah, do you want to get us started by telling me a little bit about yourself, what you're up to right now?
Yes. Hello, everyone, to our millions of listeners. I'm Noah. Let's see. I would say that I am a creative person. I like to write stories. That's like my number one thing in life is that I want to find out how to be an engaging storyteller. And so that's what led me to both fiction writing and podcasting, which is my day job. And I also do theater.
Sweet.
Yeah.
What made you want to be a writer?
A writer. What makes me want to be a writer? Well, I would say that my main draw is to being a storyteller. And writing, I had this realization recently where, I feel like a lot of writers have this, they pick up turns of phrases and they think of like, oh, that was such a good way to put this, or they're witty and stuff. And I don't so much think about like writing in that regard. Well, I'm trying to get better at it because I do want to write stories and stuff. But for me, it's all about the story. It's all about creating characters that people actually care about. And I just think there's something so magical about when you sit down to watch a story and you're introduced to these characters that you knew nothing about an hour ago. This is a movie or listening to a podcast or even reading a book or whatever. You didn't know anything about these people, and suddenly you're crying over them, you're empathizing, you're thinking about your own life. It's like just such this magical thing, and I want to be able to create that magic. Is the best way to put it.
Okay. I think that's a very well put, concise way to say it. I remember in one of my like high school film classes, we watched, it might have been that class, like it was, we watched this little video. I can't remember what director it was. It might have been like J.J. Abrams or something, but they were talking about like how as like a writer, director, creative person, you have like kind of this box or something and you're trying to like create magic or wonder out of it or something. Maybe there might have been somebody I might be confusing it with a Pixar writer, but they were saying like that's kind of the point, is trying to make somebody feel something, I guess, magical or something, whatever. But yeah.
And there's always something that's you can't really describe from that process. So there's that spark that like you can work on the craft as much as you want, but that spark is like, I don't know. It's what it's all about.
It's funny you talk about the like witty pieces of banter or something because I think from my writing, I think it probably stems from watching a lot of movies growing up and kind of trying writing formally first in more of a screenwriting context. Is I tend to do a bit better. I feel like I do better with dialogue, but I think if I, maybe not better per se, but I get a better flow out of writing dialogue for some reason. It's just so much easier for me to just like run down pages with what I feel like is more interesting versus I get held up sometimes with other stuff.
with like description or
Yeah.
action, that kind of thing.
Yeah, action sometimes I can do well, I think, but for some reason, like description, I don't know what it is. Maybe I'm not. It's funny because I feel like I'm a visual learner, but I don't. Maybe I'm not
Yeah.
piecing that together somehow. But
I don't know. Yeah. The thing is, I feel like TV shows are kind of like where it's at right now. Like if I had an aspiration of like, if that was within reach for me and I felt like I could just go for it and be a TV writer, I would totally do that.
that's
Like,
the dream.
yeah, well, yeah, I think, I mean, or features or whatever. Like, if I'm dreaming, then I might as well go for the gold or whatever. But yeah, I think the TV show writers get more creative control.
Yeah.
And I think like, but I'm trying to write this book because it's important to me to have something that I can finish on my own and have complete control over, and that I actually have the resources to make.
Agreed.
You know, and I don't know. I'm not that. Yeah, that's why I'm writing a book instead of a movie or a TV show.
There's a really good video I watched about this guy talking about like, he's like, if you want to like get your ideas to the end of what it is you're making, he's like, don't be a screenwriter. He's like you're lucky if you get like 5% of what you actually wanted. But you know, I think I've seen other people who are like, that are independent directors, and they're like, yeah, that's my goal with every project, is just to get more and more of what I actually meant to be there to be in the end product. And I think it's funny you say with these, like, I feel like creating stories for people, and with TV shows, that was the thing I was thinking about, is having creative control. I've been watching Adventure Time recently, and I'm getting into the later seasons, and I think something that was so interesting about that show was just how, for people who watched that growing up, that show grew up with you.
Yep.
And I probably watched to like season 5 when I was a kid, and then I think I slowed down, and then now I'm back and I'm in season 6, and I'm like, the last couple episodes, I'm like, holy shit, like these are intense. Like, I like some of the stuff that happens, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like feeling it. I'm like, I was not prepared for this.
I should watch that show. That seems, Pendleton Ward, I like a lot of his other stuff, and so I'm sure that I'd love that.
He did Midnight Gospel as well with Duncan Trussell, right? Yeah.
And cartoon Hangover, do you know about that?
No, I don't know.
It's like adult adventure time, or it's adult cartoons essentially. Not adult. It's basically Cartoon Network, but for adults. And he does a series, Bravest Warriors, that I really like.
Okay, I'll have to check it out.
I don't think, from what I've heard about Adventure Time, I actually don't think it's as good, and it definitely like dissolves over time, but it's a good one. I like it.
Adventure Time for me has been, for a while, it was a little bit hard to get back into, because it's like, I've seen so many of those beginning episodes so many times. It's like seeing like a SpongeBob rerun or something, and they're not necessarily made for where I'm at in life, but I feel like in a weird way now, even though it's like, I watched an episode recently, I was like, this is the most like middle school episode I've ever seen in my life, but I was like, oh my God, like I'm so invested in this, because I'm like, I can remember these, like, it was like a nostalgia.
Well, I think there's something to be said for like the fact that you're so distanced from being in middle school, but you have this top-down view of it where you're like, I know everything that happened to me in middle school now. Whereas when you're going through it, you're like surrounded by it. You're not necessarily like, I don't know. There's something special about writing stories and consuming stories about things that you've already experienced rather than things you're experiencing in the moment. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I think I get what you're saying. Like, it's that, having that. That's actually an interesting question I had for one of my writing professors at one point, was like, he kind of told me to just go for it, but I also was like, are there things that you want to write that actually would make more sense to write retrospectively instead of trying to do it right now while you're experiencing it? I think that goes both ways. I think, like, I have projects that I'm working on that I am, in a weird way, I feel like I'm afraid that if I don't do them right now, it won't work. Which, I mean, I think it would, but I think it involves some acting, and I'm like, I think if I'm not in the headspace that I'm in right now, I don't know that I can perform how I want.
Right.
But I think I could probably do it, but I don't know if it would work as genuinely as it does. But
I have no idea. I think there's an argument for both. Like the whole Joel Haver thing where he is going through his dad's death. Have you watched that one?
No, I haven't, but I should.
Pretend That You Love Me is what it's called.
Oh, that's okay.
It's really good.
I think I started it, but I didn't finish it.
But he literally has himself like talking at his dad's funeral in the fictional movie that's not fictional, and I don't know. It's just like, yeah, he was going through it, and he still... Anyway, I just think that there's something special about having reflected on a period of time in your life, and once you've thought about it a lot and like really have fully formed thoughts about all the experiences that you went through.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to still have remember enough of like what that felt like.
Mm-hmm.
Well, also, yeah, having all the reflected thoughts on it, because and I think part of it is that I'm kind of a planner when it comes to stories. And so I like to know kind of more or less where the story's going. And I feel like it's hard to write a satisfying character arc when you're like, I don't know how this ends. Like, I'm going through it right now.
Yeah, I get you. I think that's somewhat what I'm struggling with a lot of my stuff is, I think that's what, like, I feel like I can build character well through dialogue, but I'm experimenting with projects that I am wondering if that's going to be like my problem if I don't plan more. Cause I have this, I have this issue where I don't think I plan a ton with my writing. I like to get like a general idea and then kind of go from there. And that's, I think in some way, I think with certain short stories, it actually can work really well. And I can, but like that usually I think with the ones where it works really well, sometimes it's like I have a planned arc for where I want this to go, and then I get ideas throughout. But yeah, I don't know. I guess one of the more overarching questions I have for you is, did you always feel like you were a creative person, or do you? I mean, you seem like now you do.
I think so. Yeah, I think that. I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't know other people's experiences well enough, but I feel like most kids are pretty damn creative. Like, if you sit them down with crayons and a paper, then they'll draw something, you know. And in some ways, I feel like that's always the goal for artists, is to go back to that childlike joy of creating, or at least that's my goal.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I ever since I was a kid, I was plunking around on the piano. I was drawing shit. I was like, I would make these like PowerPoint presentations where there's like, it's like very crude animation essentially.
Oh my god.
There's stick figures walking around, and then iMovie projects, and like everything that I could get my hands on, I would be trying to make shit with.
Yeah.
And I was writing too. I was writing since like 4th grade. So I feel like it's been a pretty creative life. Though I have the crippling fear is always like, but what have I actually finished? Like, and that's always like, ugh.
That's a big question for later on, I think, for me.
Yeah.
The idea of finishing something larger is on my mind a lot right now. But it's funny you say that, because I think my experience with creativity was odd. Maybe not. I wouldn't say odd. I just think that maybe like different, like in some ways, where it's like I felt like for a large portion of my life, I either didn't feel creative, or I was heavily discounting my creativity. Like I was working on like YouTube skits, doing theater camp. Like I felt like I really enjoyed like writing for English and different things, but so like very analytical, but I always felt like I was more of a math person for a long time. And I don't know, that feels like it had a bit of an odd adverse effect on how I felt about my creativity. And I don't know if that has put a certain level of pressure on it, or maybe like sometimes I maybe overanalyze what I'm doing with it, but I definitely don't think I really felt like a creative person until maybe college.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Maybe even not even at least into a little bit into college.
Well, and to some extent, you have to wonder, like, how important is it to put a label on it in the first place? It's like, I don't know. I like making shit. Like, I don't need to be a creative person. I just need to, I don't know.
As long as you're having fun with it. Yeah. Not yet.
Or as long as you're getting anything out of it at all. It's like, then just do it. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I think there are a million reasons to, how do I put this? I just don't think that second guessing yourself too much gets you anywhere when it comes to creative stuff. Like, it's just like, okay, I want to do this, so just do it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. I think lowering those barriers can be, probably from what I've been experiencing recently, some of the best things you can do.
Yeah.
Just making things easier on yourself somehow, like, is, I'm too hard on myself about some stuff, and actually, as much as I'm like, oh, well, this will make me better, it's like, actually, it's just stopping me from doing things. It's just like the main thing I need to do. But
it's okay. From what I've gathered, it seems like you're way more prolific than I am creatively. Like, for whatever reason, I feel like I don't second guess myself that much. It's literally just a question of like motivation and like being lazy and just be like, I don't feel like writing right now. And it's like, or there's that. I would say that I went through a period of time where I was so much a perfectionist about my story that like literally I'd sit down for an hour and I'd write maybe 200 words. Like, I'd write a paragraph in an hour. And it's gone against every instinct in my body to be like, no, just write. Like, try to race the clock. Like, try to write 1,000 words in an hour, and like, that's how you get better. Because and it's realizing that experienced writers are able to sit down and write things off the cuff that are like pretty good. You know, I don't know. I guess I'm just curious as to what a more experienced author's process is like.
I mean, I think for me, the thing that this kind of comes down to is that I feel like my writing is I try to make my writing as much as I can not a motivation thing, but like a discipline thing.
Yeah.
Which is, I think the problem that I have with that is that it sometimes will sort of, it feels like it will screw up some of the creative process sometimes. Like, I'm, like, I do think there's something to be said about like, when you don't want to write, like forcing yourself to write something, it's like, can sometimes actually get something done, but it doesn't always produce the desired effect, I think. And I guess like another thing connected to that is, how do you feel when like somebody tells you like you don't need to write if you don't want to?
Yeah, like the script notes thing that I sent you. Do you remember?
Yeah, that guy, that was an interesting article for me, because I think parts of it I was like, yes, this makes a lot of sense. Like, if writing isn't like your thing, you don't have to make it your thing. But I also, for me, I think there's like something about a lot of like a decent amount of the days that I'm writing are not gonna like feel amazing, or like until I get like past a certain wall on that day, it's not going to be my favorite thing. But if I do it, I feel better. And I think it's a confusing spot for me, because it's like, I guess I do have other hobbies going on as well, so I'm like, I could focus on that. I've been trying to balance a bit better, but I think that sort of discipline versus motivation thing is something that's always confusing.
To me, that article was less of like, if you don't enjoy the writing process, you shouldn't write. And it was more like, I definitely think I had it in my head of like, I'm like, you don't have to chalk this up to more than it is. Like, you can. Yeah. There was something like magical about, or like, how do I put it? There's something almost ethereal about writers to me. I was like, looking at them as too high up on their thing. And it's like, no, it's just a skill. It's just like any other skill. It's like woodworking or whatever. Like, and it's so easy to be like, oh, these guys are creative geniuses and blah, 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 blah. And, I think with the stories and like stuff in the mind, there's such a cult of personality around. I'm not using that right. There's such a focus on individual creators and artists. And I think that harmed me, because I was like, I want to be one of those special people. And I was like, I'm going to force myself to write because then someday I might be this special thing or whatever. And I was like, no, those guys aren't floating 2 inches above the earth, like, because they're that so genius or whatever. It's just like, no, they took the time to get good at a skill, just like any other skill. And there's nothing different about it. If you want to get good at it, go get good at it.
Yeah.
But don't get so in your head about, that ephemeral thing that, I don't know.
I think I had a similar experience with, when I for a while, I wanted to be in film and like work in film, but I think there was a certain point where I realized, you sent me the Joel Haver video that I actually think the first time I watched that, I got a lot of good stuff for context. This video is largely talking about how discouraging the film industry can be to be in, and how many factors are like there to discourage you. Like even me, when I'm trying to work on projects now, like trying to figure out like even just what picture profile, like how the colors pop on your screen, like there can be so many different things going on there that people are like, you have to do it this way or this way. And it's like, sometimes it's better to just go shoot something, which I've found to be the case. But the I actually, when I first watched that video, I think I totally misinterpreted it. I took it as like I don't really want to be in the film industry. And I kind of just stopped doing anything relative to that. But then I think the point was more so like, stop worrying about being in the film industry and like just go do stuff if you enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
And that was, I think, a really solid message. But then also at the same time, I realized along with that video that too much of my mind was stuck on this idea of being a filmmaker and like making it in the filmmaking industry, and probably to some extent being like famous to a regard. But then I think I realized at some point that I was like wanting to make stuff to say something when I think kind of wanting to make stuff to say something when I would much rather have something to say and then make something to like portray that. Like I didn't necessarily have what I wanted to say in a medium yet.
There's so many things you can overthink about writing, like, as far as like, is this topical enough to like pitch to somebody? And like, in filmmaking, I think there's even more things to overthink, because there's the shooting, there's the lens, there's the colors, there's the whatever. It's like, and with writing, I definitely get in the headspace where I'm like, do I have something to say? Is this authentic enough? Am I copying from other people? Am I, like, there's so many just process questions, and like, am I writing from the right place right now? Like, and I don't really know the solution to that. I think the best way that I can put it in a space that's slightly healthier, I think, is that I have ideas that I'm really excited about, and I want to see them executed. And that's why I write.
Does that mean that when you get tired of something you're writing, do you push through that, or do you stop? Or do you not get tired of stuff you're working
on? I think it depends on the thing. I mean, the real answer is I probably stop in most cases, but I think that I have one idea, the idea for my book. I have a bunch of ideas that I have persisted for a while, but the idea for this book, I like forced myself to set it aside because I wasn't getting anywhere with it, and I was like in college and there were too many other things to work on, and it just kept coming back. And when I graduated college and I finally had time again, I tried to write this other story, and it just became the story that I had in my head from before. And I was like, at a certain point, I got to the place where I was like, you know what, I'm either going to write this or it's going to chase me around for the rest of my life. But like, it would make me so depressed if I was like even 30 years old or at the end of my life or whatever, and I never executed this idea that's been chasing me around for forever. So I think that if I do get tired of this idea, which I don't think is likely because there's a lot of stuff that I've workshopped for long enough that I'm really excited about it.
Yeah.
But if I do get tired of this idea, I think that will be how I push through, is like, you know what? If I set this aside, I already tried that and it's just going to come back.
That's very similar to the writing advice I talked about on here before from my professor, just talking about writing in general, how it's like you can, once you have that itch or the spark to do it, you can either keep trying to put it off and deal with it that way, or you can just do it and learn. Like, that's in a way that's kind of the easy way, is to just keep trying to write, or like keep writing. And I don't know, I think that kind of proved to be telling advice for me, considering what I've been doing recently. I feel like that just trying to write a lot, like, it's something that I feel like I will lose the habit and then I will get back into it, and then I'm trying my best to hold on to it, though, because I think it's been good. But I guess you're working in a creative industry with podcasting. This might be kind of a stupid question, but like, do you feel like you're sort of making it where you want to be with that, or is it are you just happy to be in that place, like working on that?
It's complicated. I think my job right now is not my ideal, like, creative environment, because it's honestly just not a lot of things that I'm that interested in. Okay. The Last of Us has been great because it's not too creatively draining. I just get to watch a TV show and like write questions for the creators, which is like, I would love to make that my career. That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, because I get to learn from what they're saying, and I really I listen in depth to their conversation and edit it together. And, that show has been awesome and I love it. And I got into podcasting because I liked narratives and I wanted to make narrative podcasts, and come to find out the business side of narrative podcasts is like, why would we invest in this show that's going to take 2 years to make and get the same following as a chat show that takes a week to make an episode? So it's like, well, that makes sense. Like, the output is just, anyway, it basically financially, it doesn't make sense to make narrative podcasting shows. They just do it for awards and stuff. And that makes your, brand look better. And that's why narrative shows kind of exist or get funded. Sorry, that's kind of a tangent.
No, you're good.
Anyway, all this to say, with the other show that I'm working on, it's a chat show and there's definitely space for creativity. But I have to fake so much interest in pop culture for that show.
Yeah.
Because it's not a lot of stuff that I'm interested in. I really don't buy into celebrity culture that much. Like, I'm just not invested in it. And so a lot of my time is spent just like researching celebrities and seeing what other people have to say about them. And like, oh, this is a funny thing I can say about Gwyneth Paltrow or whatever. And that's like not as fun to me. And that's been kind of a source of more anxiety and stuff.
Yeah.
All in all,
anxiety. What do you mean?
Well, anxiety because I want to do a good job on it, and I feel like I'm not a pop culture geek, and so
it's harder to engage.
Yeah, I have to force it if I ever want to. But that's kind of a lesson in this whole podcasting space, is if I'm working for a company and getting that steady income, then you don't have that much control over what you get to work on. You kind of get assigned to whatever show they need you at, and you just have to do it no matter what it is. And so I would say I love podcasting when it's about stuff that I'm interested in. And I don't love podcasts. I like creative projects that you're getting paid for that you're not interested in are like the devil for me.
Yeah.
Like, they are the worst. I had a podcast before that I wasn't into. Oh my God, it just eats you inside because it takes up all your creative energy. You're never not thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's not a positive thing to be thinking about.
And then you're fucked when you go to write later.
Oh, writing's out of the question. You don't write when you have this big deadline on your hands. And it's bad.
I feel like that's kind of why I dropped out of my program or like switched to a different program in school, was because I was just like, these are not the creative projects I want to be working on. And I was like, I was actually doing more creative stuff when I was not in this program that was supposed to be designed around this.
Which is so counterintuitive, because you'd think like, oh, if I can find something adjacent, like, there's the whole thing about creative stuff and financial stability. Yeah. And it's like, oh, the things that I love doing don't you don't get paid for them, basically. Like, and so I think that I would have more space to write if I was like a bricklayer or something, and I was just doing something very like mind numbing. And even when I was firefighting, I would just be thinking about my story all day. Like all the other guys hated gritting, and it was like about the most menial stuff you can do. And I loved it because I just think about the garden all day. Which is my story.
I feel like I've been lucky with some of the work that I've done where I've kind of just had probably more creative control than I should have been given in some scenarios. Like,
that's cool.
Just in like our old theater stuff, I was just like taking over making videos and things. Like,
that was
it was just kind of I was just kind of like just kind of make whatever you wanted with people, and like it I think that was a good introduction to creativity. I don't know. I think that it brings up this sort of odd dynamic between creativity and success, and what does success mean in creativity.
Sure.
I remember being in San Francisco to see my sister, and I saw this book in a bookstore called Small Potatoes, and it was this whole like kind of cartoony book that was talking about how the average creator will be a small potato. Like, no one or most people will not discover them, or like in various different, even depending on how good they are maybe, but it's still like talked about like you should promote your own stuff and like work on these different things. And I thought it was interesting, but I think I question, to me, it makes me question what my reason is for writing and for doing creative projects. And just, do I want to be like successful? And I've asked you this before, but I think an interesting question is, how much do you want to be great at this, and why?
Well, I think that what you're talking about makes me think of, like, I had this conversation with myself when I was coming out of college, where I was realizing, like, this is the wrong angle. No. The main thing that I think about this is that you have to set your goals within the boundaries of things that you can control. Right? And you can control how many people see your work, or, what audience you end up finding, or whatever. Like, and people who try to control that, I think, usually get steered in the wrong direction when they try to...
I certainly have in the past.
Succumb to the audience's desires or whatever. Like, I could never write a story like that. So your goals should be within the boundaries of things you can control. To me, what I can control is being a great storyteller. Right? Not, not that my stories get a huge audience or whatever, but... And so my priority is wholly just like, I want to write the best story that I can. And to me, that's just an inherently worthy endeavor. Like, if I could get one person to read The Garden, and they're genuinely engaged and care about the characters, and they gasp when the twist happens and whatever, then, like, wow, like I made that person feel something with my words. Like, what an amazing gift that you have given them. And I think it'll be just so cool in decades forward, where I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote a book in my 20s. Like, I wrote a epic fantasy book. Would I love to be successful and become a TV writer and study actors that are on my payroll that are like in the set that was designed for my story? Like, of course I would. Of course I would. That would be amazing. And Neil Druckmann talks about that, the creator of The Last of Us, in the podcast. He was like, I was like in Waiters on the set that I designed, watching the actors like talking in the corner, and I was like, oh my God, like, this was the highlight of my life. And I listened to that and I was like, I'm so fucking jealous. And that's so cool. At the same time, I think a part of my motivation comes from wanting to be great and wanting to be an amazing TV writer or animation studio or whatever. And there's, like, I know how stupid it is, but there's this little grain of hope that will never, I think, as long as I'm a writer, will never stop hoping or truly believing that it's within reach for me to be great, like, to be a great writer or to be famous. There's something. What is it? I had a thought. I think I have to believe that. I think I have to believe that it's within the realm of possibility, if I write an amazing, spectacular story, that I could market it and get it out there somehow. Like, I think I have to believe on some level that that's within the realm of possibility. Even if it's foolish. Yeah.
Well, I think I had these, I had some conversations with people recently where I was just sitting down thinking about, even not even necessarily from a success point of, or a numbers point of view, like actually getting out there, but I was talking earlier about like finishing a project, and I'm just like, I don't even know if I could imagine how good of a feeling it would be to finish one of these larger projects I have and like go through the whole thing and be like, I am actually very proud of this, and like just so happy with what I like. I'm like, if I get to the end of these things, I'm just like, wow, I actually made that. Like, that's really cool. Like, cause like I think I've had that to an extent before, but like I also sometimes have like, I feel like a tendency to discount some of the things that I do. But the I think there's a double-edged sword there though, when you have this dream in the back of your head that somehow like one day things will click, or like if I upload enough videos, or if I write the right story at the right time that hits with people's mindset, that I think when you look at your stuff that you're making and you see like maybe you don't have like the number, like the views that you want, do those numbers hurt to some extent, even at least in the slightest? Like, when you, like, if you don't have the viewership that you want on something.
Well, to be fair, I haven't made that much stuff like on YouTube that I can actually see the views or whatever. I mean, honestly, I've written a few short stories for like Medium that were like flash fiction, and I was surprised. Like, I didn't expect anything from it, and I got like a few comments that were like, "What a wonderful story!"
Yeah,
like, "Huh, some stranger read my story, liked it." I want to get back to this, but I have thoughts about this like paradox that you came up with, which is that getting to the finish line and making like this successful story is like part of what keeps me going, right? That vision of like, oh, and then I get rich and famous and everybody loves my story and whatever. But at the same time, like, if that were to actually happen, like the role that this story plays in my life right now, which is something that I can, when my mind wanders and I'm falling asleep, or when I'm walking around throughout my day, or when I'm in the shower and I just get lost in my thoughts about this like happy little world that, or not happy little, but this like fantasy world that I've created. It's this lovely thing that I love to think about and like play with. It's very much the childlike joy of playing, like I said. And so, like you said, if I ever actually got to the end of it and didn't get to think about it anymore, like, that makes me sad.
Yeah.
But the reason why I'm working on it is because I want to finish it. And it's like, it makes me sad if I don't finish it too. So it's like, what have I gotten myself into? Like, that I love working on this, but what keeps me working on it is wanting to finish it, but I also don't want to finish it because then it's over.
I have this, I feel like right now I have a legitimate fear of not finishing some of the projects I'm working on right now. And
oh, me too. Yeah.
I also think the paradox seems to relate to, in a way as well, to the idea of like, you have this dream of getting famous, or like making all the money, getting in this realm of creativity. But I feel like you see, maybe not in the creativity realm, but you see a lot of people in different areas that will make it and they just completely lose what their, or like they lose a little bit what their drive was. There's this one story of this boxer that I like. He made it to become the heavyweight champion, like beat this like relatively seemingly unbeatable guy. And this one guy asked him in an interview beforehand, was like, "What are you gonna do like if you win?" He's like, "Well, I'll probably be really fucking depressed." And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, like what do I do if I did my goal from like 10 years ago? Like, what's the point?" Like,
well,
I think like even he sprung back and like has continued to do really well, but I think it's like that thing, you're like, you see this with all these different goals in life, that people are chasing after something and then you get there and you're like, oh, that didn't like fix the thoughts that I'm having, or
it's the success like paradox, which people have said like, okay, I have a few thoughts. I think that there's post-project depression. Like, I think that that's like a huge thing. You finally get to the end of this thing that you've been working on for years. Like, can you imagine being J.K. Rowling and finishing the last Harry Potter and being like, well, fuck, now what do I think about? Yeah, this is my job every day, all day.
Yeah.
The second thing is, I think in reality, being a showrunner, like I've described as like the dream or whatever, is in reality very stressful. There's so much pressure on you to get things done on time and to make it good. And if you don't get the viewers, then whatever, like there's consequences. And so I think even the people who have these coveted positions, like, are really stressed out, and then they don't get the creative freedom and playground, and they probably fantasize about being a small-time person again or whatever. Yeah. And I think that there's something to be said for having a fantasy that's like this, the fantasy that I have in my head of where this story can take me isn't even possible. Like, there's no way for me to be this successful TV showrunner and, you know, be successful and get my book out, my story out to so many people or whatever, and also be happy and not stressed out or have any pressure on me.
Yeah.
But it still keeps me going. And I just think that there's a space for having fantasies that like won't come true, but that keep you going and make you happy to think about. Like, I don't know.
I certainly think so. I think it's something that I hold on to in a way, and for better or worse at times, I think it's somewhat natural, but I think it brings some spice to life, and for a lack of a better word.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, maybe on some level I'm believing a lie or something, or doing the thing that I've always despised about, like, religion and stuff, where you have this fantasy in your head that you kind of know isn't true, but putting a lot of words in people who are religious mouth right now. But, you know, when I did believe in, like, an afterlife and stuff, there's always that doubt of, like, does this really make sense? And it's like, you know, you can just choose to believe, like, hey, my grandma's in a better place right now or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's like, maybe not, I don't know, but it makes me happy to think of that.
What harm does it really do, I guess, in that respect?
Yeah, which is complicated. I mean,
yeah,
I think there's a space for having that cognitive dissonance just to be happy.
Yeah. I think on the writing side of, like, something that I wonder about is the desire for attention a bad thing? Because I think I've had experiences in my life where I feel like it can be a bad thing, and I maybe am sometimes critical of people who I get this feeling from, but I think a lot of that comes from the fact that I feel like I am doing this myself. Like, I am seeing or getting this, I have this desire for attention that I'm chasing after to an extent. And yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, totally makes sense. I have a lot of thoughts about, like, creating stuff for validation, and, you know, having people pat you on the back and say you're so smart or you're a genius or whatever. Like, I think that I don't know. I think it's complicated. What are my thoughts on this? Can you ask the question one more time?
Yeah, I guess the general question is, do you think the desire for attention is a bad thing?
For attention specifically, I mean, what I'm thinking right now is, like, about my love for theater and stuff, and how good it feels when you, like, tell a joke and it lands and the audience all laughs and they applaud, and you're like I get a rush of just pleasure from that.
Yeah.
And to me, that's somewhat of a wholesome thing. Like,
yeah.
It's a transaction. You have entertained them and they applaud you for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the time, like, I'm trying to think of, like, what makes a show off a show off. Like, when does it become bad? Because I think it can be bad and it can be fine.
Well, there's kind of a connected question to this that I think, or I would say it's connected. I think, so there's this sort of metaphor that I heard about I haven't read The Fall by Camus, but I really want to. But I think it's largely about this guy's, like, reality breaking down, and he's like a lawyer, stand-up person, helps out people. Like, I think his lawyer stuff is like helping out other citizens and stuff, and he has these, like, 3 moments that sort of break down his reality, and I only remember one of them.
Okay.
But so basically, there's this moment where he helps, I think he helps a blind man cross the street. And then after the blind man gets to the other side, he like turns and he either tips his cap to him or he waves to the blind man. And he just immediately after, or like, I think immediately afterwards, he's just like, what the hell was that? Like, why did I do that? And he just, even this small moment, like, just completely destroys this reality for him that he's like, I am just like performing for everything. I might be missing the point there. I'm misremembering, but that was what rung true for me is like how much of this is just like it. I think this is somewhat revolving around the idea of like how much you value truth or how, but the I guess like does it feel like you're performing for people? And I think not to stray too much from the attention thing.
Sure. You mean in my writing or just in general?
I guess both.
Sure.
In general. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely like this weird, like I think about my own pride and stuff, and like, you know, I thought for a while, or I'm kind of am thinking about, I have this turning point coming up where I have an end to my internship.
Yeah.
In March 20th, and I'm still figuring out what I want to do next. And like, I think a big part of me was like, I just want to take some time off. Like, I need some space to just work on my creative projects and like, see what comes of that and just really enjoying myself. And the other voice is the practical one, which is like, no, you should save up as much money as you can when you're young and try to go up and up and up in your career. But I think the voice that won over on that is a voice of pride. That's like, no, like I can't deal with the status of being unemployed and like I'm just working on, like I can't deal with like, and I was so desperate to get a job right out of college because I was like, if I'm yeah, I don't know, I just, and I'm like, why is that so bad? Like, and it like truly bugs me a little bit when people are paid more than me or whatever, and like there's a level of status to that I'm like, this is all bullshit and why do I care about it? This is not the direction I thought this would go as far as intention goes. But yeah, I get this like weird, and it's truly just me judging myself. It's not anything that I think about and like apply to. I don't know. I don't care. It's just weird. Yeah, it's like I mean that to me is a performance. I care about myself, I would say. But there's a part of me that's like, if I'm not going up and up and up and getting more ambitious podcasting jobs, then what am I doing? And like, that's
even when I'm like looking at jobs between like going into podcasting and stuff or trying to do something in the creative realm, I'm like, well, I did get this econ degree. If I don't like go do like economics research, like what am I doing? And I try to fight that off and just do whatever, like, or I'll apply to something if it feels right. And I think it was a very hard decision for me to not necessarily look for a job like right after school, because I like went on a trip to Europe and that probably produced some of the best memories in my life. And I think
I'm sure
people have the ability to do it. It's like, I highly recommend taking a break. But I don't, even then I had a lot of things going for me. Like I got out of school early and had like money left over from like luckily having family that had money.
Like me too.
And it was I had the time to go do this thing, and I understand a lot of people would not have that opportunity, and that sucks. But I think for me, it is definitely a weird experience. And I was honestly surprised at my ability to just be like, fuck that, I'm not going to think about working. I actually had someone basically specifically tell me before that had done something like this before going to grad school. They were like, don't fucking think about getting a job while you're on a trip like that. Like, and I actually think I was surprised at how well I did with that. But it certainly had its ups and downs still. But just, I think there is a weird status of being unemployed. There's I even saw it in there's that, you know, Theranos, the health company that like they're this big health company that got like shut down, and it's a huge fraud case, and just two of the CEOs or CEO and CFO or whatever basically just got like convicted and are being sentenced for things. But the one of the guys that was working there, I think there was a show called The Dropout on Hulu where they were basically speculating that this guy didn't leave his job because he was like, even though it was miserable, and they had like removed him from the ethical problems of it, that he felt so bad about the idea of becoming unemployed that he didn't leave, and I think he killed himself.
Oh my God.
Yeah, yeah. But not to be incredibly morbid, sorry, but
no, it's all good.
I don't know. It's weird how pride will hold up in certain certain areas, and
so weird. And it's like, what is life all about, really?
Yeah.
Like, what do I want to look back on and be like, I experienced this? Do I want to be holed up in my apartment writing shit that I don't care that much about and like for hours on end, or do I want to? And that's not fiction writing. That's writing for the podcast. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah.
And I had this moment where I was like, I haven't been outside all day today, or like all week, really. Like, I've just been holed up. And I went outside. I'm like, when's the last time I went for a walk in the woods? Like, God damn. Like,
yeah.
And I don't know. There's a lot of thoughts on that. I'm also so desperate for that trip to Europe, too. Like, I want to go travel for months and stuff.
I went on a backpacking trip this summer, and I met like 3 actuaries that were doing the full PCT.
Oh my God.
Like, they're like all like accountants and stuff.
So
and I was
funny.
like, this is wild. They're like, yeah, man, I don't want to go back.
Of course they don't. Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a war in me right now of like stability versus stability and like, and just fucking being in my 20s and enjoying myself and going and learning and experiencing shit.
There's the economic theory on like what to do with your money in your 20s is very confusing, because they talk about how that like the people talk about, oh, like you get so much more benefit out of saving right now because of compounding interest, but you also being like your 20s is like the best time to take out debt, like and like because you have longer periods of time. I think you have longer periods of time to pay it off, and you also have like, I don't actually know the reasoning fully for that. I'm forgetting what.
Well, and if you invest in real estate and stuff, then would be what I'd think. If you take out a loan and put it on a house.
Yeah. And it's just like you have more mobility when you're young, and there's more time to recover. Yeah, it's just like it's a time when you probably should be spending more money of your or more percentage of your higher percentage of your income, but also I don't know, it's confusing. But I think we've been kind of, I wouldn't say beating around the bush this idea, but I think I do think about like why I write a lot, and some of the ideas that I have are I've talked about, Trent and I went to see Banshees of Inisherin, and there's this guy who talks about being remembered, and he's like, maybe we're just performing for ourselves or something.
Yeah.
That there's part of me that thinks it's that, and then I think sometimes we're talking about being great. We've been talking about being great or good at writing, and like sometimes it's just like it feels like a challenge to me. But then there's also an element of like, I think this is probably the one for me that's more true, is like the kind of the internal joy of doing creative things.
Yeah.
And I really want to read Flow. It's a psychology book.
Right.
It's like Mihaly something. I don't know who wrote it, but it's like I really think writing is one of those things where I'm more frequently able to get into that like flow state. And I think that's sometimes maybe at like a biological level what kind of gets me. But
I just think that there's like infinite reasons to write. Like,
true.
But also, the less you hang on it, the less that you want back from your writing. I think the less, like, how do I put this? The less you hang on your writing or your story, the less high quality you need it to be, I guess. Like, if you need your story to be the thing that, the defining moment of the 21st century or whatever, and like, then suddenly there's so much expectations placed on it that none of your words are going to look right.
When the hell are you going to write?
Yeah,
that?
exactly. Yeah, you're second guessing everything, and it's like, no, just. I mean, I think that you're spot on with the like, just write for the creative joy of writing.
Yeah.
And if you get to a place where you're like, I don't like writing right now, so what's the point if all I'm doing is for enjoyment? I mean, I guess that's what you're trying to say, is that that's the problem with just writing for enjoyment, is then when you don't enjoy it anymore, does that mean that it's all pointless? I don't know. I think that it's just like you're participating in a craft and you're trying to get better at it. And that's something that people have been doing since humanity existed, is like trying to tell stories to each other to entertain themselves. And what's so bad about that?
It can be, I think to me, even at the most base level, even if I'm not enjoying some part of it, it's like, it can be, if anything, a meditative practice.
Yeah.
And there's something about trying to master something that is very, seems, like, and you could be a nihilist that, like, still, I feel like, probably be like, well, I kind of weirdly feel good doing this for some reason.
Oh,
So,
it's
like,
amazing.
why not? Like,
Yeah. I think that was the big draw to piano for me. It was like, I wanted to get really good at piano for a while, and like, just be able to sit down and effortlessly, whatever, like play this gorgeous music and stuff. And just, I think the appeal was, there's something magical, or, okay, I'm using the word magical too much. I think the appeal was that your time is literally more valuable as a more experienced person. Like, does that make sense?
I've heard theories a lot. I like the Bertrand Russell idea that there's nothing more enjoyable than like engaging with skills or knowledge that you have learned or something like that.
Yeah, and playing a piano piece that you've learned front and back feels amazing, and being able to sit down and just your muscles take over, and you don't even have to try at that point. You're just great at it. And imagine if like you could improvise like that on piano, or get to the point where it's just like speaking or walking, like that just must feel great.
Yeah.
I don't know. And so, but I felt like I had to give up piano, actually, because I was like, I want to get really serious about storytelling. And this is, if I try to split myself in all these different directions, then it's not going to go anywhere.
What do you think in that context? Like, is that, because you talked to me about, was it your uncle or your grandpa? Yeah. That told you about the regret of not focusing on one thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I sometimes I feel like I'm like really trying to fight that idea, but I also reckon I'm like, okay, I have multiple projects going on right now that I would love to finish one of them. Like literally right now, I'm like, with one thing I'm working on, I'm like, what would happen if I just took fuck whatever else I'm doing and just took a full day and was like, this and eating are the only things I'm going to do today. It's like, what would I end up with by the end of would I just be done? Like I with something I literally could be done with it potentially, but
yeah, I have thoughts about forcing yourself to write and all that stuff, but I also have thoughts about like, I think it just depends on what you're going for. I think that there are a lot of skills that benefit each other by being good at multiple things. Like if you're good at script writing and you're good at cinematography, and you're good at whatever, and songwriting and stories dovetail into musicals, and they help each other out. And at a certain point, you start to realize how similar different arts are. Like I think that music and stories are all about manipulating tension, for example.
Yeah.
And so, and getting really good at, or understanding the process of writing a story and understanding the process of writing a song, like there's so many similarities between those. And so I think that there's a way for your interests to kind of compound and become their own thing, because you have dedicated so much time to multiple things at once. It was more just for me, like, but at the same time, I think that there are times when you have to realize, like, these two things are really at odds with each other. Like, if I want to get good at specifically, like, piano playing and, like, being a technically gifted musician, or like on your instrument, that's very different from storytelling. And at a certain point, I was like, if I want to spend the hours and hours it takes to be good at piano, then I'm going to have to give up some of this stuff. And so it was like,
can I ask you what I would consider a semi-dark question?
Sure, yeah.
Do you ever feel like that's the case with like your writing and having like financial stability? are like living.
having a job or like relationships with people, like all that stuff.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that I think that necessarily, but I think it certainly is like harder.
I fortunately I think that I've gotten to a place with the garden where if I set well, now that I say this, I'm like, well, did I write all last week though? Like, I don't know. So in December, I finally got to the point where I was writing consistently, and I was writing like 4,000 words a week, which is
damn.
Wait, 4,000 words a week. No, 4,000 words a month. I wrote 4,000 words in the entire month of December. It wasn't very much at all, but I was like, at least I wrote consistently.
Not bad.
Consistently. I was writing 1,000 words a week. And then I got to the point at the end of the month where I was like, I am spending like an hour a day on writing, and I'm only writing like 200 words each session. And then I set a timer and just raced the clock and tried to write 1,000 words. And the quality was the same between, I think I've told you about this before.
Yeah.
Anyway, knowing that I can write 1,000 words in an hour and it's decent writing, I'm like, okay, I really should be able to have a job, have my relationships with people, like have time for fun and everything, and just write 1 hour every day. And that's 1,000. If I wrote 1,000 words every day, like, bro, my book would be done in like a month or 2 months or whatever. Like, I write 30,000 words in a month, I think. And that, or it'd be 3 months for the first draft. And I'm like, that's where it's at. Like, or even having focused writing days. But I think that there's a way to balance your time. I think plenty of people have had full careers and relationships that are successful while also writing a book.
Well, I think there's a good Kurosawa video that I watched. The guy who made Seven Samurai. He has this thing where he's talking about young filmmakers and why they need to write. And he's like, even if you could, like, he's talking about people who spend all day doing this. He's like, if you spend all day, even if you have a shit day, you probably will have like at least like 1 to 3 solid pages by the end of the day.
Yeah.
And like, I think like I've been trying to write about 250 words a day. Recently, I've been dividing it a bit more with trying to do other projects at the same time. But I had a really good November where I wrote, I think, almost 20,000 words. But then like we were talking about doing the November writing.
Yeah.
Not
right.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know how people write 50,000 words in a month. Like that's holy shit. But as I was like, I gotta shrink that down so I don't feel like shit every day when I hit the goal. But I don't know. I guess like, is that sort of like what your writing process looks like? Is you just set a timer and you sit down, do it? Yeah.
That's what it's gotten to. Yeah. And understand that I have not perfected any kind of writing process for myself, because right now I'm probably like, I could go on for hours about my journey with the garden and how I didn't know how to write it all. I think I'm finally coming to a point where I know how to do this.
Yeah.
Which is, don't restart when you have a new idea. That's rule number 1, because that's what I've done for years and I never got anywhere with it.
Yeah.
So whatever happens, even if you have a new idea, just add it in, put it in the parentheses, and keep moving. And the second part is, if I'm not writing at least 1,000 words a week, that's like bare minimum, then the story is going to change too much. And there's overdoing it on the incubation stuff where you just have the story in your head and you're thinking about it in the shower and whatever. And if that happens for too long, then the story just ends up going in a million different directions.
Yeah.
Never. But I think I've gotten to a good place with the garden. I just need to get back into writing consistently. And a big threshold for me was finally figuring out what the story's about and like what it actually could say about stuff. And I'm like, oh, like that's actually stuff that I could show in. Anyway.
No, I get what you're saying. Figuring out figuring out what you're going to say. Thematically, I suppose, is an important thing for me.
Yeah. And, I think that there's so many pitfalls when you're thinking about theme. Like, for example, I would never sit down and say, like, I'm going to write a story about, like, how love can be dangerous, and then just, like, come up with the story after that.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever really done it that way either.
No, you come up with the idea first, and you're like, what could I say with this story? Like, what? And for me, it was finding out that there's like a ton of like cults and weird controlling relationships in the garden, and then there's also this question of determinism that's in it as well. I'm like, oh, this is a story about self-control and like having control over your own actions. And it's like, these are things that I can inherently just blend into the story. It doesn't have to be like this big PSA or whatever, but I'm naturally going to explore it with this story.
Yeah.
And that helped me know like what to lean into when I'm writing my scenes and stuff.
Yeah. I think figuring out those details to me seems kind of like sometimes I think that I will sometimes have the ability to expand on a project a lot more if I figure those out really early.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it will take me like a significant chunk of time of writing something or like working on a project to actually figure out what it is I'm saying with it. But sometimes that actually works out pretty well. But
sometimes the subconscious just does it for you.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't realize why I was leaning into all these ideas or why they fit together so well. But like that was probably part of it, was that they all kind of fit into the same idea.
I think a lot of what I'm doing right now is sort of tackling a lot of like self-doubt stuff. And that's the undercurrent, I think, in things. And that's probably a lot of what I'm going through right now with a lot of projects and things. But
why do you think you second guess yourself so much?
I do think it kind of, some part of it ties back to, like I said, I didn't feel like I was a creative person until the last 10th or maybe a little more of my life. And so I think I have a hard time like kind of just tying back to certain things that I maybe enjoy, because I don't know. I mean, I think I did some of these things when I was a kid, but I have a hard time like finding a way back to that like trail of doing things. I think some of it is, I think the self-doubt stuff is in some ways I guess infecting other in other areas of my life right now. But I think I'm managing surprisingly well, but at the same time, I mean, I guess something I wanted to talk about was just, I think some part of me is I think a lot of people have this. Some people are afraid to share their writing with people in some contexts, and part of that for me is like I don't have a lot of like formal writing experience with like I took like 2 writing classes in college, and one of them I loved and the other one I liked. The other one, it was like I don't know if I liked the end product, but I still enjoyed being in the community, and it was screenwriting. But I think I get worried that like sharing it with people will break down my internal joy of it. But then at the same time, I did tell myself at one point, like, I think it was in November when I was writing a lot, I'm like, okay, this is something I legitimately want to get better at. And to do that, I need to actually like give this to somebody, at least when it's like finished.
Right.
And because I'm in the novella length area right now with something I'm working on, and I think I know some of the bigger flaws with it, but I think a lot of it does. This is kind of a long-winded answer because there's a lot of factors in it, I think, but I think a lot of it does kind of come back to that idea that I don't know if too much of my motivation is focused on, am I good at this? That was something I question a lot of the time if my stuff is good. Sometimes I will reread something and be like, wow, that was actually pretty damn good. And then other times I'll read the thing that I wrote on the first day of this month and I delete it because it was so bad. I was like, this is trash. Normally I don't actually delete stuff. That was just a uniquely shit piece. And that was one that I'm like, it was just not. I spent maybe 30 minutes writing something, and then I realized that it was not the vision that I wanted. And I think part of that actually did kind of come from the fact that, like you were saying, I started a little bit more in the thematic area. And when I try to write thematic stuff and like add context to it and something, it does not usually turn out as well as if I just write. Like I really liked there was this one love story from Raymond Carver that I read in like high school.
Oh yeah.
And I've always loved the idea of kind of writing something in that.
What story was it?
I think it was called what we talk about when we talk about
Yeah,
love.
I was about to say that story. Yeah.
That one, I was like, I've always thought about it'd be fun to try and write something kind of in a similar context. But I'm like, I think with something like that, a lot of the time, I think too much about executing a purpose with it, when I'm like, maybe if I just started writing, I actually enjoy and I feel like I flow enough with dialogue writing that if I had just started trying to write something like that, it would probably turn into something.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I really have, like, I mean, I've given a long form answer, but I don't know if I have a solid reasoning for why I doubt my stuff so much. I think it ties back to a lot of stuff we're saying that I've already mentioned, but also like, if I want to get somewhere with this, like it has to be good, or and I think I've been trying to I've talked about this so many times, of just trying to break down the barriers to entry with my stuff. And it's so hard to like, just like trying to film something and like, I'm like, well, it would be kind of cool to shoot this in black and white. And then I'm like, okay, well, what are people's recommendations for that? Do I still need to color grade with that? And they're like, you should definitely still color grade black and white. And I'm like, I don't want to fucking learn how to color grade right now. And I especially don't really want to do it if it's in black and white. But then all these people are like, oh, well, you should, if you're going to do black and white, you should shoot in color, and then you should have a monitor that will show you the black and white so that you can actually see what it looks like. I'm like, you fucking kidding me? I don't have money to buy a monitor to like attach to my camera and bring around.
So then you're like, you know what? Why don't I just fucking shoot the project and see what happens?
That's what I've been trying to do. It's been, and I think that's been going a lot better. I'm trying not to worry about like, I'm like, worst case, I'm shooting it in color, but like, I'm like, worst case, if I decide I want it in black and white and you can't fucking see a shot in black and white, I'm like, whatever, I just won't do black and white. Like, it's not, but I'm trying to move more into that realm, but I think I just, for some reason, I'm too concerned about, I set really high expectations for what I'm doing, and I'm too concerned about if what I'm creating is good. And that kind of, it's begging the same question you just asked, though.
No, that's fair. I'm trying to think of, like, I think to some extent, like, my just overwhelming confidence in the garden's idea, like the core ideas of the garden are like what keeps me going. And they could be completely off base. And I've even like read or Brandon Sanderson said something about like ideas are cheap, execution is all that matters, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I that was like, oh no. But yeah, I was like, if ideas are cheap, like what am I even doing here? Like, I'm not an experienced writer. Like, what makes me think that I'll be able to pull this idea off if like the idea isn't even the thing that matters or whatever? And then I was like, you know what? Fuck that sentiment. Just like the fact that you're confident about these ideas, the fact that keeps you writing, just go with whatever keeps you writing. Like, honestly, believe whatever you need to believe about being successful or whatever. And that's kind of the mindset that I got into. But it's also amazing to me that you're able to be so prolific and keep making so much shit, even though you're like also second guessing yourself so much. Because I feel like if I was in that headspace, I would not be as productive.
I think part of that comes from kind of just having a lifetime of doing that with a lot of things. I've found certain strategies to adapt, but I also think I think it's this sort of battle that I'm waging in a lot of areas where it's like I feel like a highly productive person, but also a pretty anxious person. And I just, in most things, I'm kind of doing that. And
that sounds fun.
It has its advantages and disadvantages. Like
sure.
I think and I think I've gotten I think college helped me a lot to become like a better adjusted person in that. But I don't know. I think this is the nice stab question, I guess, is like do you feel like you'll ever create anything of like real value to, I guess maybe value outside yourself is a harder question.
I don't know what you mean by value. Like,
I don't know if I know what I mean by that. Do you think like I think I am, with my writing, I feel like I want to move someone like emotionally. And I am, if I get to my deathbed and I'm like, I haven't done that, concerning.
Let's see. Of value. I don't know. I think that like where I'm at my most like where the storytelling and like value to other people is most married for me have so far been very spontaneous things like running D&D campaigns is like I just get to play. It's not that much effort. It's all fun. There's barely any like
It's like making
hard work.
It.
Yeah. And when my players are into it, which right now I've been DMing a campaign that's, and so I would say that's valuable. Like,
Certainly.
Well, I give these people a wonderful break. They get to escape into this fantasy world. I probably get more out of it than they do, but that's okay, you know. Like, and they have good feedback afterward, and they're like, yeah, that was really fun. You know, I had a good time. I'm like, wow, a story that I told them, or the story that we made together, like. And then the other thing is, I tell Kristen stories right before we go to bed, and just like help her fall asleep. And to me, that's valuable. You know, it might not be valuable in the same way, but and then but my favorite times are when I'm able to tell a story that she kind of leans in and wants to know what happens next. And I'm just making it on the spot. I don't know where it's going, but I made this story about like, oh, there is this kid and he saved up all his money to buy this bicycle and blah, 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 blah. And like his mom was really struggling financially. So like he had this paper route, his name's Michael. And, so he was only able to do his paper route by saving up to buy this bike, and he's able to help his mom out. And the next day the bike's gone. And Kristen's like, what's going on? You know, whatever. And to me, that magic is like why I'm doing this. Like where you're like, wait, where'd the bike go? Like who? And then you come up with the friends who like have their own details about them, and like, I don't know, like that's as, let's see. So that keeps me going. That keeps me like, you know, to me, that's already has had value. I've already done things that have value. And so I don't worry that I might go to my deathbed and never have moved anyone.
Yeah, I guess in a general sense, I don't worry about that really.
But I think there's a deeper level to it of like, well, and the other thing is that okay, where am I going with this? I'm terrified that I'm going to get to my 30s or my deathbed or whatever and not have finished the garden. Like that depresses me. If I don't get this story out in whatever quality. And that's another thing that keeps me going, is being like, is just telling myself that I'm writing the first draft and it doesn't have to be good in the first time around, and I'll make it good through revising and editing. Like that helps me keep going and being like, okay, it's okay if I have this shit right now because I can come back and make it better later. Yeah. The question is, are you scared that you might never create a story that's valuable to another person? I don't know. I guess I just feel like I'm getting there where I'm able to. I think that's going to be a huge thing that I'm learning and thinking about when I'm revising the garden, because I think that it's very likely that I'll get to the end of that draft and read it and be like, this isn't making me feel anything at all. And I think it's just about, you know, just like any other craft, you know, if my woodworking table like doesn't stand on four legs or it can't hold a certain amount of weight, then I'll go back and adjust the nuts. But I guess I don't think of it as like, is this valuable or not? It's just, is it doing the things that I want it to do or not? Yeah.
I think as much as I asked that question, like it's something I am worried about, like maybe in the back of my head a little bit in some molded form of the question. But I think I said earlier, like if I get to the end of this project that I'm working on, like this film thing, and I feel like it has done something and like like I get to it and I'm like, if this says what I wanted to say, like even if it's like, I mean, I hope it's not boring, but like it's kind of the point. I think that will be an immensely good feeling for me. And I think that I don't know.
The other thing is that I had somebody came into our creative writing class and talked to us about how like the world does not need more writers. Like if you're writing, don't have these delusions that you're going to make the world a better place with your writing, because like, maybe he didn't put it like that, but he was saying basically like the world is very oversaturated with writers. So if you're thinking holistically from like, what value can I contribute to the world? Writing ain't it. Like, go to service or whatever. Like, go do like a volunteer or whatever. Like, that's how you fill that need to be valuable to like society or whatever. And I think like the best writing does like to really change things in society and whatever. Yeah. But that's not personally like why I write. I'm not writing to, put it this way. If I wanted to take on something big and spend as much time on something to make society better, then I would not be writing. I already said that. Yeah. And so it's not, I'm like, okay, well, I keep coming back to this thing. I know that it's not because I want to like, well, okay, I say that, but I also am coming at it from the experience of somebody who grew up loving fantasy stories and watching movies and stuff, and just like, and to me, they have been such a positive thing in my life, and reading a story that really takes you in and makes you escape into this world and feel entertained and have fun and, you know, feel sad at the right moments or whatever. Like, that is such a gift, and I would love to give that gift to somebody else. So maybe I'm getting...
Make the magic thing like happen like that.
Yeah. And so I would say that there's a big part of my writing that's thinking about like, what's somebody else going to get out of this? But, you know, all in all, it's more about me. I think it's more, you know,
I remember the word the guy used was wonder. It's just like,
I think I've seen that TED Talk. It's a TED Talk. Yeah.
And I think to some extent for my own sake, and just I think I'm succeeding at this decently well, just trying to make myself feel wonder out of whatever I'm doing.
Like, yeah.
I think to me that's a lot more sustainable. It's not like you said, you're not making something for an audience. You're not making something to make, you're not getting caught up in what other people want you to do. And I think there's like something to be said about trying to make something more entertaining. Like, I'm trying to make the podcast more entertaining, but at the same time, in doing so, I'm trying to make it more organic, because that's what I want it to be. I want it to be a place where I talk to people about ideas and don't get caught up in like entertaining people. Like, the whole point is that I talk to people about stuff that I don't always get to talk to people about.
Sure.
And I don't know. I think that a lot of it is always coming back to that, like that play on that idea of like searching for success, but then like the average writer is going to be a small potato, and like it's like you're going to be people will go unnoticed. But there's some, like, I think I struggling and also reconciling the fact that like that's like coming to terms with the idea, but then also being like, no, I'm not going to come to terms with that. I'm going to keep trying to not, like, I'm going to keep trying to like find a way to make this a big thing, but also like not put so much pressure on it. But
I don't know that I like the phrase small potato.
I don't really either, to be honest.
I get what it's trying to say, but it feels too like demeaning, I guess.
I agree.
Or it's like, no, you can be grand and wonderful and have a story that you can share with your family, and, you know, they'll read it for generations or whatever, and like not get famous or whatever for it, but still have it be this, like, it's not small. I don't know. It's not, it might not be consumed by a lot of people, but why does that need to make it?
Exactly.
It makes it sound like it's less significant than it is.
Yeah, I think, like, literally, you're telling Kristen stories and stuff. I try to, when I remember and stuff, when it's like an event or something, I'll try to write Megan like an off the cuff story or something. It's like a little thing. Like, and I don't know. I don't think there needs to be so much pressure necessarily. We spend so much time talking about Joel Hayward, and I think that's. I have like a video I was talking about, I totally misinterpreted it. I rewatched that like 2 years later, and I was like, oh shit, I like did not really get what this was going for.
Right.
And like, I think I get it now. And I like am rediscovering kind of certain things that I love because of that. And I think so much of his philosophy, like I think is a few things about sort of, it's all, to me, it all feels about eliminating barriers to your creativity. And like, I think it's about creating creative habits that you enjoy, that aren't about getting paid for them necessarily, and like recognizing that the average person might go unnoticed, but there's like it shouldn't be about, it's not about getting noticed, it's about having internal thing. And
I mean, just like woodworking, like your typical woodworker goes into their garage and works with wood because it's fun, it's satisfying for them, and they're like, they could get really good at woodworking and they're not going to get famous for it. But they could give things to their friends and family, and they enjoy the wood and whatever, and they're participating in this long time skill and whatever. It's just like, why is writing the thing that we all get so caught up over? And I think it's because there is that stage for it, like there isn't for woodworking. Like there's no, there's that performative aspect, like you said. And it's like, no, why can't I enjoy writing like somebody might enjoy woodworking?
Next thing you know, history is gonna have like Carved in Pine. The show comes out for all the woodwork. No, I see what you're saying. I think,
and I still wouldn't describe that guy as a small potato.
No,
like no, I think he's enjoying himself. He's making awesome sculptures, and like the better he gets at it, like I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I guess that's the thing, is like getting really good at narrative, like really, really good. It just transcends needing to be good at anything.
Well, like who the fuck cares when I like about if people are reading my shit when I can spend a day and like make a whole other world,
or
like,
make a whole other world, or make somebody sob about somebody that they don't know. It's like, and if you reach that level, I have a hard time believing that you won't at least be regionally like well known or like that you'll, your stuff's gonna get out there a little bit and people are gonna read it, and if you can build those kinds of stories, then you'll be known as like a storyteller.
I think that's another thing is the video is called "You're Already a Filmmaker," and I think that's something I've also been trying to do is like I write shit, like I'm a writer.
You're a writer.
Like, I'm not, like it's, I think there's a lot of cynicism around that, and I've been there, I've been in that, and like it's kind of crazy to think about how it's all like the discouraging stuff, and it's like, have to do, like, I that's why I think I appreciate Joel Haver so much, is there's so much encouragement, and like that idea of, you mentioned it a while back, that like feeling about like copying or taking inspiration from people. And his thing is like so different from what I see a lot. I mean, there are a lot of filmmakers out there that there's no such thing as like an original idea anymore. But I feel like puts that into practice, and is like, you taking inspiration from people is like a natural part of the creative process. And like, if you are true to yourself, you will come out with something different, even if you do like almost the exact same thing as someone. And it's like, I think that's like the most applicable perspective of that I think is really interesting. And like, I think there's like malicious forms of copying, but I think like I think if you're thinking about copying somebody and you're like, I don't know if I should do this, you're probably not doing it in a malicious aspect. Like,
For me, a worry for a while was that I wasn't like damaged enough to be a writer.
Dude, I totally get what you're saying. It's kind of a fucked up, dude. Have you heard of, like, of course you've heard of Hemingway. Hemingway, like, I'm pretty sure was like afraid of not being an alcoholic, like, because he's like, I can't write if I'm not an alcoholic.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and that's the whole comparing yourself to other people is not only like doesn't really get you that far, but the other thing is that there's this like idea that like you're either a writer or you're not, and like if you're not a writer, then you'll never make anything of value or whatever. And I think that's so bullshit. I think that most people, if they can like read decently and have, whatever,
Anyone can write something.
they can. Yeah, I mean, I just think that there's a level of talent and stuff. Like, I think that that's worth acknowledging, but it's like, it's not like you're either a writer or a math person, or you're either a writer or you're not. It's like, no, just fucking try it. And
I think it's about wanting to do it in a way.
Exactly.
Like, it's like, if you want to be like, because like I remember being in my fiction writing class, like even the intro class, I was like, what? I got 2 different stories to like read and edit, and like one of them I was like, okay, like I feel like this is just kind of like another class for you, but like, like there's still something interesting here. Like I don't know for sure, but then like the other person, I was like, oh, like this is like actually a pretty damn good story. Like I like where this is going. It's like that's like your level 1 class, like, and it's like probably more than half the people there haven't like legitimately tried to write any fiction,
Right.
And like that was, I mean, at that point, I don't think I'd tried to, besides maybe some like small screen stuff or like imaginings and ideas, like I'd never tried to put something on paper. And like, that was a very profound experience for me, because I had never had like like that much, or like I had never maybe at least accepted the reassurance that I had in that like field. Like I remember there was this incident where I was in my English class. I think it was the end of my English class in high school, senior year, like IB English. And our teacher decides, the last thing I want to do in this class is I want everybody to take 3 minutes and talk about something you're interested in front of the class. And it was like, honestly, I'm like, fuck, that was like such a cool thing to do. But like, I was like, I was weirdly profound. I remember I got it, like looking back on it, I was like embarrassed thinking about this. But then I was like, so basically what I did is I got up in front of the class, like walked around the room and like sort of used my hands and gestures to like imagine up this tiny little scene I had imagined taking place in a laundromat. I like thought back on it. I was like embarrassed about it. But then I was like, wait, but all of the feedback I got from people was like insanely positive.
Yeah.
And I was like, is this just like imposter syndrome in a bottle? Like, do I actually have the capability to like piece something like this together?
Yeah.
Then I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, and I think that there's a level of which you made yourself vulnerable and not to be what you're cringing at.
Yeah, I think so.
But you're saying that was reassuring in the sense that like, wow, I felt really embarrassed about it looking back on it, but I got a lot of positive feedback. So maybe I'm just like, I do have a talent for this. And
I think it was, I wouldn't even necessarily say that was reassuring. I think it was a thing that I looked back on and recognized some dissonance that I didn't really understand. Right. I was like, oh, yeah, that's a weird, like a little snapshot of what's happening in my brain and things that might not be being processed properly or something. And I think, I don't know. I don't really know how I got to that, but so I was just like, something I think about it. It kind of makes me wonder, like, is it hard to be creative? Is it like, I feel like sometimes it's hard for me to be creative, but I think a lot of that is attached to this idea of like, I'm trying too hard to be good at it, when like, if I just kind of let things happen. Or do you ever feel like you wonder how, like, why you spend so much time? Like, do you ever think about like, what if I just spent all this time when I got home, like working on shit? Or like, I like, if I just like actually got myself to do these things all the time, but like, why is it so hard to like, we accept that this is like a fun, interesting thing to do, but we don't spend, like, it's like hard to get yourself to start sometimes.
Yeah, it is funny. I think there's a big element of just like creative energy is not a renewable resource, or it's a finite resource.
Yeah.
So you only have so much creative energy to spend throughout the day.
True.
Is one thing that, like, I'm pretty sure about that one. Well, I don't know. I don't know that I mean, I feel like,
I think you can produce it to an extent, but
it's not as fun.
That's still, no, it's not as fun. And that still comes down to like base level energy. Like if you don't have the base level energy to do something, it's like you have to work to get into that. And it's like, and even then it's like, sometimes you're just fucking tired. Like,
that's true. And so, yeah, I don't know. maybe that just determines how fun it is versus dragging your feet through it. Neil Gaiman talks about how like some days you're just like writing and it's like just flows through you and it's magical. And then on other days you're forcing yourself to put it down each like brick by brick, building this story or word by word. And he's like, often when he looks back on the days where he had to force himself versus the days where he was just like glorious and flowed through them, he can't tell the difference. Is what he said.
Oh, the writing, like he can't tell is that what you mean? Or like he can't tell the feeling?
He can't tell the difference between quality.
Gotcha.
Between the two. And so he forced himself one day, it felt glorious and amazing the next. And he was like, yeah, it's
the same.
It's the same. It's all you. And when you are in this space where it doesn't flow out of you as easily, there might be a difference in output, but the fact that you're thinking through more analytically and being like, no, this word doesn't work here, this word does work here, like the filter is the same. It's still filtering through you. And at the end of the day, like you settling on a certain word, whether it took you 10 seconds or 10 minutes, like you would have come to that word either way. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe I'm getting kind of lost in my own.
I get you. I think one thing for me is like on a personal element is I need to get back into revising and editing stuff. Like I think I'm hoping that when I get to what I feel like is the end of this writing project, I can be like, I'm actually going to spend significant chunks of time like working on this. Cause I think that's been my thing is I've had some stuff that I get done with and I'm like, like, I don't know if it's hard. It's almost harder for me to get to do that than it is to write, but I don't know. I think
I love revising. I think I like revising more than I like writing.
I think I actually like it more than I think I do, but I don't do it enough for some reason.
Well, yeah. For me, I'm just trying to get the first draft out before I revise too much because I know that I'll spend way too long revising if I don't. And I feel like I won't know. My revising will be of a higher quality if I know concretely where the story's going, what it needs in the earlier scenes and stuff.
Yeah. So that idea of reaching 30 and not being done with this.
Yeah.
What would that mean for you? Like what does that mean if you don't do that?
That's a good question. I don't know. It just like just picturing myself at 30 and still working on the garden just sends a spike of fear through my heart. Like, and it's part of it is like, oh my God, like I've been thinking about this idea since high school. 6 years I've been thinking about this idea and it's coalesced into what it is now. And yet, what do I have concretely to show for it to other people? I can tell people my idea and that's pretty much it. And that depresses me. And it's just like, just something about the length of time and just knowing what I could have after all that time and what I actually have, like the opportunity cost, I guess, just depresses me. And I think that's like the main thing that I would get to at that. And the other thing is like, if I can't do this in 16 years, which is how long it would be at 30, then it's like, will I ever create anything at all?
Yeah.
That's my fear. It's not will I create a story that's valuable. It's will I create a story at all? Yeah. Will I ever finish anything?
What's a story to you then?
Well, and by that I mean like finishing a writing project or which yes, I've finished verbal stories to other people and stuff, but that's
I think that's an interesting thing to think about as well. Like, does there's obviously traditional conventions within storytelling, but like then there's like other stuff like the movie 8.5 that I watched in November that's like essentially mostly just about being meta and not really, I mean, in a weird way it's about nothing, but it's also telling a story about it being about nothing.
You know the best analogy I've heard for meta stories is
what?
It's two mirrors facing each other and it creates the illusion of depth but doesn't actually have anything like in it.
It's I
haven't seen that specific movie.
Well, no, I think that's kind of holds true to this, but it's in a weird way. It's like creating that illusion of depth and recognizing that it is an illusion is also kind of the point of it. which is like
That always is the point of meta shit.
it's like it's this weird.
Usually meta shit like hates itself.
Yeah, it's such an odd movie.
It's fun. I like meta stuff at the end of the day, and usually you get a good mind fuck out of it.
Yeah, and
yeah,
I don't know. I think that I've been feeling that a lot recently. The idea of needing to finish something, because I'm like working on projects, and I like sometimes I'll finish editing a chunk, or I will finish writing a section. I'm like, I read it or I watch it, and I'm like, oh my god, like that. Actually, I feel like that turned out how I wanted. Like I'm like, holy crap, that's what I wanted to happen. I'm like, okay, I need to like keep doing this instead of just like letting it sit there.
Well, that at that point, that's when I would like share it with people and stuff. Do you mean you finish it and then it achieves the desired effect, or you finish a scene? Or
I finish a scene,
I see.
And like that's no. If I'm done with it, I'm gonna like put it out there.
Nice, yeah.
Well, I guess like movie video stuff more so. The writing I would like to share with people.
So I get excited about sharing stuff with people. I think one big goal of mine for the garden is just getting it to the stage where I can send it out to beta readers.
Yeah.
And that will be like Christmas for me, because I'm like, yay, finally I get to see what other people have to say about this story and comment on my ideas. And so that's something that I'm looking forward to. And I can't help myself but tell people about the idea. Like, since for a long time I was like, if I tell anybody, then I will lose motivation to work on it and blah, 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 blah. And then I opened up to, I think, Oliver first, and he was really supportive about it and helping me workshop things. And I realized, oh, this is kind of part of it, or it can be if you do it in the right way, where you can tell your ideas to people and they'll tell you, oh, I'm not as interested in watching that. And, I think it's dangerous because their ideas can start infecting yours, and
I worry about that.
You get paranoia about the idea not being as pure or whatever. But at the same time, sometimes they come up with things that are like, that's genius and that fits in perfectly here. And it's like, that's all me. I mean, making that judgment and saying, but I needed the spark from somebody else.
I think I don't always have the hardest time with ideas like sharing, but I think maybe that's something with my writing that's kind of the deeper fear, is that I will have revised and rewritten my story and I will understand what's happening and I will give it to people and they won't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's almost the fear, because I think to some extent...
Well, wouldn't you want to know that before you like go out and shoot it or something? Or
kind of, but I feel like at that point that's like there's a like, who are you making it for at that point?
Yeah, I think about this a lot too. It's to what extent do you have the audience in your head as you're writing? And it's complicated because on some level you have to have the audience in your head. Otherwise your story just doesn't fucking make sense in the first place. And so to me, it's like, I want to make sure that certain things are clear in the story without letting other people's tastes necessarily infect it. You know what I mean? And to me, there's a difference between being good at the craft, and there are like some, I hesitate to say this, but like objective, and I'm doing air quotes here, things that will make your writing better. And then there's just purely taste stuff. And like Reed, for example, when I was workshopping the idea with him, he was like, he hates fantasy stories. He doesn't like magic and whatever. And so there was like some magical elements that he was like, this sucks. This is stupid. And I'm like, well, I know that that's just you, but well, where was I going with this? Oh, thinking, to what extent do you think about your audience when you're writing? I mean, yeah, I don't know. At the end of the day, I think it's just a balance, and you take it case by case.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even I'm trying to do that with this and just try to like, I've got some part of me wants to like make sure that people are intrigued by it, but then I'm like, well, I want to make sure that I'm having fun with it, because like otherwise, why would I do it? But
I think a lot about making it entertaining and immersive, and I think that there's like craft techniques and stuff that you can use to make. If you make this character this much more likable by adding these moments in, then people will find them more appealing and want to know what happens next in the story.
Yeah.
I do think a lot about that. And it matters to me if I make a scene and somebody reads it and they're like, this was boring. Then I would be like, okay, tell me why you thought it was boring and I'll try to workshop it. And I don't know. Like I think that the like some of the core ideas are for me. Like some of the themes and stuff are like this is all me like having something to say. But then the actual execution and the like whether people care about my characters and if they actually give a fuck what happens next in the story, like that is for the audience in my mind. Like I'm thinking about it in terms of like I want this to be clear to the audience. I want them to understand what's going on. I want them to want to know what happens next. Like and that's all part of the magic. And like what I said at the beginning of like I want to be able to create that magic. Well, that's a very audience centric idea if you think about it. If what my goal is to create magic in other people, then I almost need people to tell me like, hey, this isn't working and here's why. But the impetus to create the story in the first place is all me, and I don't know. I guess I just think that it's a blurry enough line that it doesn't really matter. It's just I don't know. Now I'm getting all in my own head about maybe I do think too much about the audience. No,
I think like there's for me it's this I think some part of writing or like making creative projects could possibly be about connection and trying to maybe, I don't know about generate that connection, but feel it out, maybe things that I don't want to say to people or talk about all the time. And I think there's probably some level of a fear there that I will put myself on a page or on screen and
get rejected.
And people won't connect with that. And I'll be like, oh, I am as isolated as maybe I feel at times.
Oh, man. That's heavy. That's really heavy.
It's not all the time that I'm feeling like that.
Sure.
But it is like maybe a wavering thought that comes in sometimes.
Yeah, and I think part of this is that the nature of what we're creating is very different. But if I were to like... Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm a little bit more sure that the feelings that I'm trying to communicate, which it feels like you're talking about putting yourself on the page and being rejected. And I think that the feelings that I'm trying to communicate are things that everybody feels. And I'm pretty sure of that already. I don't think that I have the same fear of isolation. Because what I'm trying to write about is like not having control over your own actions. And I think everybody knows how hard it is to stick to a diet sometimes. And like, everybody knows the feeling of having a conscious thought and wanting to do it and then being lazy about it or whatever. And that's all I'm really trying to communicate with this story, or like I'm trying to explore that more. And I think that, but I don't know, with like this deeper stuff that's like really, well, I can't imagine that you're feeling stuff that other people like don't feel at all. Like,
no.
I think that if you found other stuff that communicates the same things that you're feeling, then you know that if people aren't connecting to it, it's probably less a reflection on, I would think, on the fact that those feelings aren't, it's not a reflection of the feelings being universal or not. It's a reflection of how well you were able to communicate those feelings. And so I think that those are things that like, well, if people reject it or if people don't connect to it, then that's just a matter of going back to the drawing board and seeing if I can communicate it in a better way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's the execution of it in a way, but
it's the execution, and it's like
taking the pressure off of your own internal questions.
I have had a worry where I started thinking about writing stories about firefighting and stuff, and like the main character would be me because and then I was like thinking about myself in the framework of like how you create characters for fiction, and it's really important that those characters that people care about what happens to those characters, and to some extent that's relatability and likability, though, whatever. And I was like, if I was the main character of a story, would people like me? Would people care about what happens next to me? Like, do I have the right qualities it takes to be an engaging main character? And I was like, that's the closest I think I felt to like, oh, if I put myself on the page and people don't like this, then they'll just be rejecting me.
Yeah. I think when I'm writing, I I really hate writing myself. When I am writing or making something, I like to make something that is includes like pieces of myself.
Yeah.
Like that's because I think if it's not in there somehow, even if it's a thought that I don't agree with something, it's if nothing like that is in there, it's like it just doesn't come out for me.
Totally. Yeah, no, I feel the exact same way. Putting pieces of yourself in definitionally, your characters are a part of you. Like,
Yeah.
There have to be some kind of thought that you've had before.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah, I think that's about all the questions I have. Do you have
any final thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or questions for you?
I don't need them, but if you want, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we had a good conversation. I've gotten a lot to think about.
All right. Well, I think that's a good spot to end it. Thanks everyone for listening. Hope it was a fun time.
Yeah, don't overthink your writing process.
Yeah,
everybody.
Have a good life.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.